Hi, hello, salut, bonjour. I hope you're doing very well from wherever you're watching at this moment. Once again, I'm glad to connect with you as we continue to make sense of what's happening in the Republic of Cameroon, especially following the post-election countdown that continues to spark tensions. Once more, we start off the top with most important facts. But before then, I want to take this moment to thank all of you that have continued to show support. Whether you've subscribed to the channel, you've liked, you've shared, you've commented, we see you, we hear you, and we continue to try to make your voice count. And now, just to tell you about the updates of the most important things that have been happening across the country. We start with the fact that some political party leaders, especially the PCRN of Cabral Libi and the SDF of Joshua Osei, have withdrawn their petitions that they submitted at the Constitutional Council. The reason for these withdrawals is yet to be understood by the electorate, especially the public that is yearning for these opposition leaders to actually come out and speak up as to what actually transpired on October 12th. One is wondering what could have pushed them, especially the candidate of the SDF. It is also important to highlight some concerning reports that some SDOs, senior divisional officers in some part of the country, have been writing letters summoning leaders within their community. Those leaders that come from the Anglophone regions, they say, the Bamileke heartlands, and the northern region of the country, where Tchiroma hails from, calling on some of these leaders, telling them, making sure they understand that no protests will be tolerated or no civil disobedience will be tolerated. In some way, giving them the responsibility to go down and calm their people. Critics say this only goes to fan the flames in an already tense situation across the country. Because why would SDOs, senior divisional officers of particular regions, go as far as writing letters to summon leaders of specific communities, as though to say the people from these communities are the only ones who could probably erupt in a riot or protest against any proclamation of results that does not reflect the ballot box? That is concerning. And more so, we want to also highlight the fact that bishops, the clergy, have come out to also write letters indicating that they are praying for peace and calm, making sure that people stay put and continue to observe the result proclamation that is coming forth, but also saying they hope that the result that will be proclaimed would reflect what happened on the day of elections. And this is not the first time that the clergy in Cameroon have been so outspoken when it comes to public discourse relating to governance and the political life of the country. As you would recall, sometime in January this year, when the Bishop of the Diocese of Yagua, Monsignor Yaoundé, came out clearly in one of his homily and said, I'll paraphrase, "It is preferable for the devil to rule Cameroon than for President Biya to run for another mandate." And as you recall, in concluding that homily, Monsignor Yaoundé cried out that they have suffered enough and they were not going to suffer anymore. We also have reports that in the same Far North region, some CPDM top brass have been writing letters to their constituents, telling them to stay calm and to be very careful not to involve in any form of protest prior to the proclamation of results. In the midst of all this, some media critics also point to the fact that state media and other prominent media organizations have been full with so many long debates and punditry, falling short of addressing any preliminary results that show Tchiroma leading. It seems they have been given stern warnings or forbidden to even talk about it in that light. They say this level of censorship only makes this debate more noise than substance, because outside the studios, the real conversation is happening in the streets, on TikTok, on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, and what have you. Therefore, in this piece, we connect the dots. We probe into the petition withdrawals, the preemptive measures, the perceived censorship on media organizations, and all the different information overload that we have online, the rebuttals and counter-rebuttals from all sides. Let's start with the basics, information. We are told that about 8 million Cameroonians registered to vote in these particular presidential elections. However, no independent body, no political party, no observer has ever seen the full national voters registry. And why? Because in a country where the last population census took place in the late 90s and early 2000s, for which the real results were published in 2005, up until date, there has not been any other census. So the population has doubled in many instances. Over 60% is below 25 years old. So there's been a rapid growth in that demographic, and many people have come of age to be able to vote. But that information is not made public, and it's only within the hands of the ruling CPDM party. Because without that information, most political parties will not understand how to map out their strategies to campaign. Because in functioning democracies, political parties are given this information, this register, so they can be able to do door-to-door campaigns in a very targeted manner, to work in places where their campaign would resonate more with the voters or potential voters. Because these are some of the things that continue to weaken the credibility of Elecam as an independent body. Critics are asking, is this a state secret? It looks like democracy without data. And therefore, you remember when the MRC party continuously probed to have this document public, have this information made public to all political parties so they can better prepare for these elections. And that is the first crack in the system. Now, let's talk about the law, the Electoral Law of 2012. 13 years old, never revised, and yet is being used to manage elections in a country where the National Assembly sits for sessions and sessions without even probing into important matters like this, when you have political parties constantly championing that this law should be revised because it wasn't written in an era of digital technology and smartphones and therefore is outdated. And yet, nothing is happening because it seems critics say it was written in an era of political control. And we've talked about the 15-day window of time from which the tally sheets have to travel from the polling stations and right up to Yaoundé, where the Constitutional Council has to use the reports coming from the divisional headquarters to publish and proclaim the winner. All of this creates an opportunity for any party that wants to continuously rig or fraud during an election cycle to do so. But in this case, for 43 years, and within the period of time when this law has been in force, forgetting about Onel 1, Onel 2, we can't go back in history, but they've also been marked with so many cries of fraud and electoral malpractices. For example, the law gives Elecam the power to organize elections, but the law does not give Elecam the power to publish preliminary results after the polls close, but tells Elecam in section 113 to publish the results of each polling station at that polling station. Nothing stops Elecam from publishing the results if they wanted to do so. But because the law does not tell them to do so deliberately, they choose not to do so. And that is why we have this big vacuum, which has been filled with the youth using their smartphones to document the counting process and even film everything and document irregularities and plaster them online. And yet, the silence that has followed without preliminary results and trends of who is leading in the count also continues to fuel suspicion. And it can only lead one to conclude that this law wasn't written for digital democracy, but for political control. Now, let's take a brief moment to quickly mention that the National Commission for Final Counting has wrapped up its work in Yaoundé, which means that they've compiled all the results already and prepared a final report which has been forwarded to the Constitutional Council. And all that is left is for the Constitutional Council to go through petitions, those that are left in their roster, and finalize and do their proclamation at whatever date they choose. And we're just mentioning this because some people still expected that this commission would have done some magic. And like we mentioned, if any irregularities, fraud would have happened, it had already taken place on the field and within the process of transmission. So within the 48 hours and 72 hours, during which the procès verbal would have left a polling station, traveled through the communal headquarters, passing through the divisional headquarters, and then come straight to the central administration. That is where anything that would have happened would have already happened there. So expecting to hear any form of big revelations from the National Commission for Final Counting was nothing, because it was almost like a simple exercise, like we said. In layman's term, it's a secretariat for the Constitutional Council. They just put things together, and as we saw, the chairperson come out and address the media, saying that everything went on smoothly, apart from one other particular division that they decided to include because they felt that it didn't meet up the 72-hour window. They felt the decision wasn't right, so they overturned it. And also there was an outcry that the results of the center region in some particular polling stations did not arrive, and they arrived after 72 hours, and yet this commission still accepted it. So in essence, like we said, it was just a rubber stamp process. And so we just wanted to take a moment to mention that. Now, let's talk about the big picture, the rise of digital citizens. For the first time in Cameroon history, we've seen the youth mobilize themselves using all the platforms, the different technological gadgets to make sure that they film, document, capture the entire electoral process. And that is why you see the call for the respect of the results that came out of the polling stations on the night of October 12th. That call, you've heard that call over and over, because the youth know what they saw. And that is what they are waiting for. And a typical example is the mobilization that you saw in Douala, in the neighborhoods of Bonamusadi and Makepe, where when allegations of fraud was spread out, there was a great mobilization instantaneously, and there was a good rally to deter any form of falsification of the different procès-verbaux from the polling stations around that area. And that is how you see the power of technology and social media. And Tchiroma Bakari is making great use as he continues to publish his own results. And that is what has given way for what we now call an explosion of information online. The good, the bad, the fake. On all sides, you hear different theories. Of course, we know how to detect fake information because we saw a post that indicated that CNN was projecting Tchiroma Bakari as a winner. That was fake. We also saw another screenshot that indicated that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, had called to congratulate or indicated he was congratulating Tchiroma Bakari. That was also fake. But in essence, the team of Tchiroma Bakari say they are doing a fantastic job to make sure that they go through the results with a fine-tooth comb. And they are publishing them part by part. We've also seen some different platforms copy this information and modify the figures and publish it elsewhere, which again, that's why we call for vigilance. Because this information war is not going to lead us anywhere. Critics have also decried the fact that some university lecturers have been going on platforms calling Tchiroma Bakari all sorts of names, even trying to attribute the intention of a coup d'etat on his head. Something that is a very bleak memory in Cameroon's history, because 1984 will tell you something. And this is not the kind of information that should be propagated on any media platform. And this has left some media critics and observers very perplexed, because they cannot understand why the National Communication Council continues to issue warnings to certain media organizations but allows the propagation of certain information on other media platforms. This is not a healthy communication environment, and there has to be some decorum when it comes to public discourse, especially with sensitive matters that involve the life of the state. In light of all this, whether you support Tchiroma Bakari or not, one thing is clear: his movement has ignited a burning desire in the hearts of the people, and they are no longer passive. And as you know, the youth grew up online. They know their stuff. They know the data. They know the power of screenshots. They know the power of recording videos. They know the power of transmitting information on the spot. And that is a living legacy. As we move into the final week before the Constitutional Council of Cameroon proclaims the results of this election, every hour counts. That is why you're hearing of the meetings, the letters, the calls, the deployment of troops, all signs of a nervous state trying to manage the narrative. But as you know, we continue to call for vigilance, because the people filmed it, the people documented it, the people have evidence they say is overwhelming. And yet, the leaked results that are coming out are indicative of something different. One is only left to wonder: is it to test the public perception and to see how people will react, should that be the final result? And meantime, you hear of so many calls asking people to stay put and stay calm. Is it a psychological tactic to try to subdue and have people accept that which they are decrying, that they want change. Change because 43 years is 43 years too many. And therefore, we call on all those that have a voice to use their voice for good, to make sure that they are serving humankind and not a particular individual or group of people. Because at the end of the day, that is the only true legacy that can move a nation forward. Until next time, God bless Cameroon.